Hi, and welcome to Acquire in the Desert. Most people, they see the internet as a great advantage. They can go on Google, they can stream, and they can do different things. But not many, they think about that one day the internet will be used to enslave the general population.
Now that you have a basic understanding of how we work over here at Loom Corp, I would like to introduce you to one of our latest projects, the Control Grid. Since ancient times, it has been the desire of the Illumined to wield control of the masses below, both to protect us from them and them from themselves. The tools through the ages have been effective, but always blunt and inaccurate. But now, with the release of new technology to the masses, we have the real ability to implement a control grid with finance, industry, government, and military under our strict control. We can safely shift the population into a new world, monitored and controlled by Illumicorp.
Technology such as the internet, GPS, and RFID chips are pillars of the invisible prison we are erecting around the people. Within the decade, we will have real ID cards that contain criminal records and pertinent information, all linked to federal databases. Cell phones will tell us where each individual is, linked to the same database. Through intelligence agencies and Homeland Security, we will monitor individuals who oppose the Great Plan and remove them from the grid. Quickly, the population will learn that they have a choice: support the system and benefit from its luxuries, or reject it and lose access to the grid.
Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 17. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Most people don't see it, but the internet is a deceptive trap. The internet enslavement process has begun. Like the depopulation program, it is a slow but accelerating process. If the process was faster, the general population would see the trap and back out. However, once you are trapped in it, the enslavement will accelerate. Already now the world is trapped and enslaved by it, and most people are not aware of it yet. The internet belongs to Lucifer and to the Illuminati elite. The Norwegian evangelical preacher Eil Edvardsen once said that every time you type www in your internet browser, you are proclaiming the number of the beast. He says that www is the esoteric code for the Hebrew wow, 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 which means 666. Since the Hebrew alphabet is void of vowels, you get www trying to express the same in the Latin alphabet. The V's represent the establishment of the fifth age as well. I can't confirm this because I haven't seen it in any esoteric books or heard any Luciferians say it directly, but I think it's plausible. One thing is for sure: the internet belongs to the Illuminati elite and will be used to enslave the general population under the coming New World Order. The Israelites who stayed 430 years in Egypt didn't become enslaved overnight. No. Lucifer's method of enslavement works by gradually deceiving, luring, and trapping, deceiving, luring, and trapping. Alcohol and drug addicts didn't become addicted overnight. The same with mortally obese people. They didn't just wake up one morning obese. No, they were gradually deceived, lured, and trapped. The Luciferian elites are going to make you gradually more and more dependent on the internet to a point where you can't move or open a door or a window without the internet. I'll come back to that. Allow me to describe the sequence of entrapment as I have experienced it, and then go on with what we can expect to see in the future. When I started using the internet occasionally, it was in the 90s, and there was no commitment whatsoever. I didn't even own a computer which could be connected to the internet before around year 2000. I got the computer and there was no commitment whatsoever. I just used it for sending and receiving emails and nothing else, writing some books and stuff. Then I remember one day, I believe it was in the early 2010, when it became mandatory to submit tax reports online. I used to work in the local tax department, and every year I would go to one of my colleagues to get advice and to submit my tax forms. But now the local tax office had been closed and there was nobody to go to. The only option was feeding the computer with online data. I didn't have my own internet, so I had to go to an internet cafe to do the thing, and it annoyed me because I didn't want to communicate through the internet and I didn't want to pay for any internet services. But it became worse. Gradually, all communication with governmental institutions had to be done via the internet. Daycare, school applications, visa applications, doctor's appointments, and it became mandatory to apply for, download, and daily monitor a governmental secured e-box connected to my social security number. It became necessary for me to purchase my own internet connection, and on top of that I had to pay an annual media tax of approximately $500 to the government. It became worse. All my utility bills and other bills could now only be paid via the internet, and bank transactions had to be done via NetBank or mobile pay. Most contracts were now signed digitally, which was a problem for me because I stayed in many different countries and digital signatures were initially only available in the country of residency. In 2007, I got a job in London with a company where all the doors and the door locks were linked to the internet, and there was surveillance cameras recording every movement. Everything was monitored and controlled via the internet. Every time I entered the door, my name and time of entering was registered. I was filmed, and I had to use my electronic work tag to open doors. My phones and computers now constantly became outdated. My apps which I used on my job or for my business didn't update or didn't work anymore with the new operating systems. There was nothing wrong with my phone and my computers, but I was forced to buy new ones. The new ones had iris scanners, fingerprint scanners, and face recognition scanners, which were used not only to open my devices, but also for net banking, passwords, and digital signatures. Some apps which I had been using offline now only worked when I was online, or would request online registration within some scheduled intervals. What? I couldn't access documents and data stored in my apps on my computer unless I regularly signed in online. I like to work offline because it protects my computer from viruses, hackers, and other nosy institutions like the secret agencies. Not that I have anything to hide, but I consider privacy a human right. And knowing about the very nosy institutions, I try to protect my privacy. I now got a letter from my phone company that they would switch off my SIM card unless I came to an office and submitted copies of my passport, evidence of residency, 3 months utility bills, and my biometric data. I refused, and they simply switched off my SIM card. Not that I had anything to hide, but I respect other people's privacy, and I simply don't like when somebody wants to breathe down my neck. Somebody is obviously monitoring my calls, else it wouldn't make sense to add biometric to the SIM, right? Have you noticed that many times when you sign in using your Apple ID or your Google account or your Microsoft account or your email account and etc., that they send you a verification security code to your mobile phone? It's a lot safer that way, right? Let me tell you the truth, it has nothing to do with your security. No, it is because someone wants to ensure that it is you using the phone. The Illuminati elite behind this endless registration doesn't want anyone to use a phone which they don't know the identity of. They want to know that it is you and nobody else using a specific computer, tablet, game station, and etc. My credit cards now became wireless. What a relief! And my bank sent me an app, which of course only works with the latest iPhone model, which allows wireless payment in all stores in my country of residence. The phone recognizes me by face recognition or fingerprint, and payment is done automatically via the app when standing near the counter. I don't even have to take the phone. That's brilliant, right? Very convenient. But there's a catch. What they are doing is that they are slowly conditioning your mind to accept the coming RFID microchip, which is planned to become mandatory. It's a slowly progressing trap. Just like the depopulation program poisoning, this is a slow but accumulative process. Let me tell you the truth. You are already trapped, and there's nothing you can do about it unless you run away to a remote place like a big forest or a mountain and hide. What we are going to see in the near future is scary. Since I travel a lot, my house is vulnerable for thieves breaking in, and that is why I've got this new brilliant system which monitors my house and is linked up to the police alarm center via the internet. Via the internet and via apps on my iPad and phone, I can monitor my house. I can see who has used and locked the doors and or opened the doors, and I can see if any of my windows are left open. And I can turn on and switch off any light as I desire in my house via my app on my iPad. If anyone breaks into my house, the police and my neighbor will be notified immediately, and face recognition cameras hidden in my house will identify the intruders, and speakers will warn the intruders to vacate the house immediately, or they will be recognized and prosecuted. My wife has got one of these Fitbit bracelets which monitor her heartbeat, sleep pattern, motion pattern, and how many steps taken. The information is transmitted wireless to an app on the phone and then stored in the cloud. Every step taken, every picture taken, every video I watch, every internet page I visit, every record I keep, every transaction I do, every purchase I do, every ebook I read, every music I listen to, every telephone call I do, every number I store, every email I send, every chat I do, and even my pulse and heartbeat get stored in the cloud. I used to be a professional classical musician, and I used to have about 400 books and 800 classical CDs at home. But let me tell you the truth. The Illuminati elite do not want you to have any books, CDs or DVDs which they do not know about. No. Nowadays your music and videos and books must be accessed by digital streaming, right? Very convenient indeed. Illuminati is programming the new generation not to use any hard copies anymore. In the Disney movie Zootropolis, the fox Nick is looking for a CD got missing and says, who uses CD anymore? And that is teaching children from an early age that hard copies is old-fashioned and streaming is the way forward. Very convenient until they begin to decide what you can access, or until they decide that you can only access if you accept their conditions. Let's say their conditions is something like, let's say it's a new world order. There are a GPS in every new car today, hidden or in plain sight. Convenient, right? Then I can find my way and get info about my position, speed and other excellent information. If the car breaks down, you can talk to a help desk via your GPS system in your car. The catch is that every spoken word in that car can be recorded and every route driven can and will be monitored. In the USA, if you don't pay the fees on your car, the car dealer or the authorities can remotely switch off the electronic ignition system so the car can't start. No, I'm not lying. Fingerprint scanners and other biometric scanners will soon become mandatory to open the doors and start the car. And start is only allowed if you have the latest corona vaccine, and of course for your safety you need to have the latest ID 2022 and etc. I have a friend who is a bus driver and he told me that the bus will not start unless he does an online biometric scan and blows into a tube checking for alcohol in blood. A same system is installed in the Swedish taxis. At the same time, we are rapidly approaching the cashless society, which is not only safe, but extremely convenient. Right. But convenient for who? Have you ever wondered what would happen the day somebody throws you off the internet? That could be because you don't want to adapt to the new world order, or let's say that you don't want to be vaccinated or shipped with one of these new revolutionary, extremely convenient RFID microchips, which are a lot safer, and by the way, is now mandatory. Without the microchip, no doors will open for you. You can't even switch on the lights in your home. No phone, no computer, no information, no books, no music, no movies, no payments, no shopping, and your car won't start. You can't buy food, you can't sell anything, you can't travel, you can't move unless you walk. And that walk will be limited to the next city gates, which will be closed for you. It's game over for you. You are hopelessly trapped. Let me tell you the truth. We're in that trap already. We are being enslaved. By accepting this new technology, we are no longer free, but slaves. Internet hostages, prisoners. That's what we are. Let me talk a bit about surveillance. Lucifer is not all-seeing like God, but he sure wants to be. Consequently, microphones and cameras are built into every internet device you can imagine. All smart TVs can monitor you, even when switched off. You can watch TV and the CIA can watch you. Everything is recorded and stored. In the old days, CIA would decide to go and install secret microphones and cameras in your home or in your car if they suspected that you were hiding something or had any information of interest. In the old days it was follow that car. Today it's follow all cars. CIA don't install monitors anymore. No, we buy them and bring them into our homes ourselves. You are part of their Truman Show. They know everything about you from cradle to grave. Do you know that your devices and phones are monitoring you even if they are switched off? In CIA they call it hot on the hook. The only way you can switch off your smartphone is to take out the battery. Okay, now you know why you can't take out the battery on phones like the all-seeing iPhone, all-seeing iPad and on Samsung phones and tablets. In most public places are installed surveillance cameras which can recognize you on your face and your gait. Your gait is the way you walk, which is unique for all humans, like fingerprints. In Beijing in China, surveillance has reached a new level. China is using a new AI surveillance system developed by Microsoft. Every citizen is accredited with a social digital credit points, which with a range from 0 to 950. The scale has a red, yellow and green range, and as long as you are inside the green range, you are fine. You start with around 490 points or 500 points or something like that, and every time you do deeds considered good by the communist government, your social credit points increase, and every time you do things or say things considered bad by the government, your social credit points decrease. If your credit goes into the yellow or into the red range, it has serious consequences, like your house rent increases, you can't get discounts in shops and restaurants, your passport and driver's license are revoked, you can't use public transportation anymore, and you can't enter certain places and shops anymore. These restrictions are enforced until you add enough to your social credit to re-enter into the green range or by doing what is deemed good by the Communist Party.
They're constantly monitored by facial recognition cameras that are able to instantly put a face to a name. Now the Chinese are also ranked, given a mark out of a possible 950 points. A score in the 700s is considered good. Around the 500 mark is not. For now, the number is a sort of bank credit rating, keeping track of everyone's spending habits.
It forces us to be well behaved.
It may seem scary, but it's just like that here. We're used to it, and anyway, we don't have a choice.
But in an effort to keep all of its subjects in line, Beijing is taking the system a step further in 2020. It's aggregating data gathered by banks, private companies, and the state to rate if someone's a good or bad citizen. The state will go over every detail of a person's life with a fine-tooth comb: their financial situation, spending habits, career, even behavior on social media. Criticizing the government online or displaying outward signs of wealth is a no-no. On the other hand, praising the party or giving blood increases your social credit. Xiao Wenwang is a model citizen.
As a good citizen, I respect the rules of the road. If I didn't, I'd lose points on my social credit.
In theory, everything can be taken into account in the social score, even the most innocuous errands like supermarket shopping. When Xiao Wenwang makes an electronic payment, her purchases tell the state a lot about her. Buying cigarettes would count against her. On the other hand, nappies show she's an attentive mother. Beer could indicate alcoholism. She'd be better off buying water. In this pilot city of 8 million people, there are only 18,000 model citizens. For Xiao Wenwang, there are perks to be had, such as paying half price for the bus.
I get discounts for all public services, even at museums. And the library is free for me, thanks to my score.
A good score brings benefits, but people with low scores lose rights. The cinema names and shames people considered untrustworthy, plastering their details, even their addresses, across big screens. The Supreme Court has created a blacklist for so-called bad citizens, those whose ratings have dropped to 0. On it are companies, but also 23 million people to date. Among them is this journalist Liu Hu. He got a little too close to uncovering corruption among high-profile party members. After being sued for defamation by the subject of a story he'd written, he was blacklisted. But he only realized when he tried to buy a train ticket and was told he was banned from traveling.
That tells me I'm still on the blacklist.
Punished because he's been branded untrustworthy by the state.
Once you're blacklisted, you can no longer get a bank loan, start a business, buy an apartment, or even send your children to a private school.
Yu Hu is among a tiny minority of people who have dared to criticize the system, which some are calling a digital dictatorship.
I worry because I think many people like me will be deprived of individual freedoms, and all of us will live with restrictions of one kind or another.
This credit system is going to become mandatory in China beginning from 2020. In Xinjiang, they have taken surveillance a step further.
到处都是监控，每天装甲车啊、一些坦克啊，在社区里面走来走去，也没有具体的法律规定，没有它的一些尺寸。
Reporting in Xinjiang, in China's far northwest, feels like traveling in a war zone. In the past year, police have stepped up security. The region is now under what's probably the most intense government surveillance in the world. Here, China is experimenting with futuristic spying technologies. Authorities say the separatists are Islamic terrorists. We came to see what life looks like in a place where your every move can be monitored. To be in Xinjiang means being checked every day, multiple times a day. When you go to a market, when you drive a car, when you take a train, even your smartphone is checked. Chinese rulers have been trying to control Xinjiang for roughly 2,000 years. The region is well positioned for controlling trade routes between Europe and Asia. It's also rich in oil, coal, and natural gas. In 1949, Mao Zedong sent his army into Xinjiang and incorporated it into the People's Republic of China. Many Uyghurs saw this as an act of colonization. Over time, riots erupted. In recent years, violent attacks by separatists have occurred inside and outside Xinjiang. To bring order, in 2016, Beijing installed a new strongman in Urumqi, Chen Quanguo, who was known for locking down Tibet, another rebellious region. In Xinjiang, Chen has taken his methods of mass control to a new level, turning the region into a laboratory for new surveillance technology. ID cards loaded with personal details are used to track people's movements. The system also tracks faces. An immense network of security cameras, some equipped with facial recognition, is constantly monitoring the streets. Facial recognition systems are also used to match people with their ID cards, everywhere from shopping malls to gas stations. Authorities use artificial intelligence that can alert them if someone in a video is walking too fast or parked in the wrong spot.
The Xinjiang Chinese are totally enslaved and trapped by the internet. They are definitely prisoners, held hostage. At my job, there's a lot of legislation, and the legal requirements change frequently with the change of technology. Consequently, I have to go for a lot of courses and pass multiple exams every year to prove to the relevant authorities that I'm up to date. This is kind of okay. I used to meet up with other people in classrooms to receive instruction from a teacher before we took the exams. Today, all my exams except a few are now online, and the teaching is online too, and there's nothing I can do about it. It is a one-way communication. I can't present any suggestions or questions, and I can't discuss any issues with my computer. No, everything has to be 100% according to the protocol of the online teaching and exams. I'm basically being told what to do, and don't question it. What I think and feel doesn't matter. You see, this is another form of control and enslavement. Under the new world order, everybody will be ID microchipped.
Alright, we get everything opened up here, and then we'll start the procedure.
And for the record, in terms of a pain scale, if you can compare it to something.
Probably more like a bee sting.
The latest office innovation is a microchip implanted in the skin.
This is the first American company to ever try this.
So what are they tracking, and would you say yes if your boss asked you to do the same?
I think it's a great idea, and I think it would make it all a lot easier. I just think that you have to back it up with maybe some doctors saying it's good for your health, and then I think I would do it.
3 Square Market is a company working on one of the biotech advances at the forefront, implantable RFID or radio frequency ID microchips. The tech has been around for decades, used to track pets, packages, and livestock, but now the Wisconsin-based company is trying to make the implants mainstream. Even with all the risks and unknowns associated with this technology, I was really curious what it'd be like to have an implant. So I traveled to Wisconsin to get chipped, thinking, what's the worst that could happen? The chip is coming out at the end of the day. And the RFID chip is already inside there?
Yes.
And it's a little bit larger than a grain of rice. I was slightly nervous about having the microchip inserted inside my body, given the size of the needle, and also nervous about what it could potentially mean for me, but here we go.
Why don't you take a nice big deep breath in, and exhale, release. There we go.
It's in there.
It's in there. Pretty quick and easy.
I feel like a cyborg.
Here you go, you're a proud member now.
Indeed.
This would facilitate that because you wouldn't need to carry any cards or cash. Everything would literally be stored on the chip.
There is no GPS tracker in the chip, which was really good to know. And the applications for it were actually pretty sweet. I could now open doors, fire off texts, forget all of my passwords, and even make credit card payments.
Let me ask, what are you going to do the day the government tells you that the RFID microchip is mandatory? At that time, after years of immense media propaganda, they would probably have invented super cool name for it, which sounds less intimidating than RFID microchip. They haven't told you, but it is clear that without the RFID microchip, you can't access the internet. What happens the day the New World Order government begins to lop off the heads of those who don't want to take the mark of the beast because they are considered a threat to society? Here's what Ken Peters saw in his vision.
And so I began to run, and I ran and ran and ran. I seemed to believe in my mind, in the dream I ran a couple miles. And I got caught by one of these strange-looking police trucks by these military police. They knew my name. Even though I didn't tell them my name, they knew my name. And they took me to this government building. It was a large building, and took me into a room, and there was my wife and the older gentleman that I began to call the evangelist. They had been captured, and they knew exactly where to take me. That was very astounding to me because I wondered, how did they know all this stuff about people? You know, I know that we're watched right now. I know that Christians are monitored in our country. I know that Bible-believing Christians are monitored. The FBI monitors Bible-believing Christians. It's been happening for years and years. Recently there was a printout in major papers that described what the FBI considered dangerous people. One of the categories was Christians who are Bible-believing, regular church attenders that believe what the Bible says is relevant for today. Those are threatening individuals to the FBI. And so they knew things about us, and they took us into this room. I was in there with my wife and this older gentleman. They began to politely interrogate us. They began to ask us to, be cooperative, come into this agreement with this new government, and everything will be fine for you. Well, my wife, who you'll meet if you come to meetings in the future, is one of the boldest Christians I've ever met. She's also probably one of the kindest and most gentle believers I've ever met. But she will get in the devil's face. And she and this older man began to preach to these people that were trying to convince us of this new alignment of this government. And so they took us out of there and put us in another room, and now it was a lot of mind control interrogation. What happened was, my mind, I could feel pulled in almost to this order and say, if we just don't cause any trouble, it'll be okay. That's how my mind began to function. But yet the older gentleman and my wife began to just fight this with all their spiritual strength and challenge it with scriptures. it was amazing to me because the capturing of us was almost as though they had planned it out. You know, I don't know how this being got to my house and how they knew to catch me, but it seemed like it was being planned out. Some strange things that I saw right before this happened to me was that all the nations of the world were as one. There was no longer any sovereign individual nations. Continents were no longer divided into countries, but continents were divided into regions. And one thing I want to tell you about this time, that the awareness of God being on the global scene at this time was nearly impossible to detect. The global order had no presence of God in it whatsoever. Evil at this point in the dream had begun to pervade every aspect of society. Darkness was everywhere, and I was telling Stan this, that what I saw was there was a clear line of who was God's people and who wasn't. I mean, you could walk down the street and you would know instantly who was who. It's not like it is right now, whether you're wondering if, you know, sometimes you go into large groups of people and you're wondering, I wonder who's saved here, I wonder who knows the Lord. This was so evident. There was a clear line of delineation. Demarcation was marked spiritually and was clearly seen. When we were being interrogated, the mind control was phenomenal. It wasn't like any human could do in an interrogation. My mind began to really be swept with anxiety and fear. And then because my wife and this older gentleman kept being very bold and kind of in your face with them, they took us out and they took us into this very, very long corridor. In this corridor was thousands of people lined up. The corridor, it seemed to be at least 100 yards long, probably longer. But in my ability, in depth perception in the dream, it was a long, long line of people. And every 5 or 6 minutes, these people would walk forward and take a step. We had been in this line for a long time when people would barge in through the doors on the side of this corridor and begin to grill people and tell them to renounce their faith. They would never use the name Jesus. They would never use the name Jesus Christ. They would never use the name God. But they would say, you should renounce your faith in Him while you can still live. And your faith is empty. And it was a blasphemous kind of challenging that these people were bringing against the people in the line. And every so often somebody would crack. They would just collapse and they would drag them away and they would renounce their faith in Christ. It made me very, very uneasy to be in this line because I wasn't quite sure what they were going to do to us. I wasn't sure if they were going to put us in prison or maybe beat us up to scare us or what. It wasn't made clear yet to us. Eventually, we made it through a battery of 3 double doors. After the last double door, we were put into like a holding cell kind of a room. And there was the old man in the front of the line, my wife, and then myself. And they opened the doors very quickly and took this older gentleman into the room. And I don't know what happened to him at this point of the dream because they shut the doors very quickly. 6 minutes or so later, they opened the doors, this time wide open, and what I saw was the most empty feeling I think I've ever experienced in my whole life. I saw this man that was a very, very big man. I was sharing earlier in the tour that he was tall like a professional basketball player, but he was very big like a professional football player. He was an extremely large man, and he had a big hood, like a satin hood, over his head with eye holes to see out of. My wife was in front of me, and they began to tell her she could renounce her faith and live. And now I realized what was happening because this man was standing there with a huge sword. I probably should have drawn a little transparency tonight to show you what the sword looked like. But to trace it kind of in the sky, so to speak, it started down here with a handle and began to come up like this, and then like this, and then a big arch like this. And it was a very, very frightening looking sword. And then I saw this table that was a little bit longer than the average human being and a little bit wider. And my wife said she wasn't going to renounce her faith in Jesus. She began to preach powerfully. And, you know, I wish even today I was as bold as her right now, because I'm not. And she began to just rebuke the devil and you name it. I mean, she was doing it. And so they got angry and strapped her down on this table. By the way, it was like this, face first. So she was looking up to the sky with this man standing behind her with this sword. He took the sword and chopped her head right off, right in my presence. I saw it. I don't want to tell you that I want this to happen to my wife. I don't know if this will happen. I've never heard clearly God tell me that I would die as a martyr yet. I know that everything in the dream so far has transpired almost exactly as I saw it. But what happened was with this sword, it left an indelible mark in my life. Many years after the dream, I was participating in a county fair. I was actually visiting it in a place up in California, at Visalia, and I was watching a parade, and there was a bunch of older guys riding little motorcycles and zooming around, and they had vests on and little caps. It was kind of strange to me. I didn't really know how it fit in, but afterwards I was walking down a side street, and there was a big van, a big cargo van, and it said, please support children's hospitals, the Shriners, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden it had this cap that these guys were wearing and the sword that I saw this executioner holding. I just sat there and froze when I saw this sword. I didn't know how to take it. I didn't know how to perceive it. It was, it just emptied me out of all my ability to think really clearly. When I left that fair, I went and started studying out because I thought the Shriners were pretty nice people. I mean, they had nice hospitals and you know, they helped a lot of crippled kids and that kind of stuff, and I had no idea, but something told me that this sword was connected to them somehow, and I began to research them, and I found out that they in fact are involved in quite a bit of some dark things. And I found that the little cap that they wear, the fez, is red because they've promised to dip it in the blood of Christians because of the anger and animosity towards the Crusades where the Christians killed lots of Muslims and Jews. The other thing is the sword, and it's called the sword of scimitar. And I searched this out, and it was the exact sword that this individual was using to execute people. I had just witnessed my wife being executed. And I was very grieved, but to be very truthful with you, I was more afraid of what was going to happen to me next than the fact that my wife had just died. And I know that sounds very selfish, but if I told you any differently, I'd be lying, and God would deal with me. I was more concerned about my life than her dying right then. I was very afraid, and I knew that now I'm going to die. And I knew that in my mind, I could not do this. I was not going to make it. I was paralyzed, and my mind began to torment me and almost became literally blanked out. My stomach began to shout out loud that, Jesus, please help me, I'm afraid. But the message couldn't get out because my mind was paralyzed, and it was as though I had the flu, an extreme case of the flu. My teeth were chattering, and I was shaking with chills in this line. I could not process my thoughts whatsoever. It was as though that I had totally lost all faculties of my mind, my ability to cognitively be aware of what was going on at that moment. It was terrible, and although it only lasted for maybe 5 or 6 minutes, it seemed like hours because of the extreme weight of this attack on me. I know a lot now, more than what I did in the dream, about the assaults of Satan and how he can work. But during this dream, I had no idea. I began to really try to cry out in my stomach. All I can tell you is I knew it was my spirit now, but in the dream it was just a war in my stomach and my mind. And finally it's as though something penetrated out of my stomach into my mind, and I was able to spiritually call on Jesus and say, I'm afraid, Jesus, please save me, help me. At the very instant that communication spiritually happened, I felt a hand grip my shoulder. And again, it's very unusual because for a brief period of time I was more interested in the hand gripping me than actually what was happening to me. as soon as this hand gripped me, I got very warm and the chills left me, and it was as though my mind could now see and kind of comprehend clearly what was going on. I'll never forget the hand. It was a very rugged looking hand, and it looked as though it had been through a great deal of work. Almost, you know, like a man who's a blue-collar worker that uses his hands like a mechanic or a builder or a plumber or something. It was a very rugged hand, and it was a very thick hand. It wasn't like mine. You know, I'm kind of a small-boned person, but this was a very solid hand, and it gripped my shoulder, and warmth and peace began to flood through me. After a few moments, I turned back, and there was the Lord Jesus Christ standing behind me. I don't know how he got in that room, because it was just a small holding cell and the doors behind us were shut. And then all of a sudden he looked me in the eyes. He looked at me very, very sternly. It wasn't like a reproof or conviction, but it was more of just him looking and peering into my life. And the most unusual thing occurred to me. At the very instant I looked at him, his eyes were not brown or green or blue or anything like that. They appeared to be red like fire, and they were just looking clearly through my whole life. Somehow at that moment I was able to realize that him looking at me was actually looking through me, and he knew everything of me. He knew my strengths, he knew my weaknesses, he knew every lie deep down inside of me, he knew every deception, he knew every place that I was afraid and I had compartmentalized. My whole being, by him looking into me, was exposed to me. It was very frightening. It was a very intense moment. I wish I could say that seeing Jesus at that moment made me very happy. It didn't. It made me very fearful. I understand now what the fear of the Lord is because of that experience. I've had the Lord visit me 3 times in my life, the resurrected Christ, and each time He's manifested Himself, it was never a tiptoe to the tulips for me. It was always, I wanted to hide under the carpet because, am I here to die? What are you going to do? What do you want from me? It was a powerful manifestation of Jesus. It was not this, we're pals and buddies kind of a thing. I did not see that. I saw Him in His awesomeness. And when He looked through me, He knew everything about me. He knew every nook and cranny. And about a few moments after realizing this, realizing my own depravity, He spoke to me and He looked sternly into my eyes and He said, "Fear not, my son, for death will never hold you." This was unusual to me. And then instantly it was like a kind of a courage flooded through me. I wish I could tell you that I got very bold and preached a great sermon and got everybody saved, but I didn't. It was just courage to go through what was before me. And so these men strapped me down now. And this individual, by the way, before they strapped me down, they asked me one more time, "You can renounce him now." And I said, "No, he's the Lord of all." And I knew that he had saved me in the dream because of the prayer and the thing with that older man. But when I looked at him, I knew now, and I can tell you folks, I know for a certainty, he is the Lord of lords and the King of every king. And I'm telling you, where the scriptures say, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess His lordship, whether in heaven, on earth, or under the earth. When I saw Him, there is not one knee, there is not one tongue that will not confess His lordship, regardless of what side of the coin they are, when He reveals Himself to them. Every knee will bow. Trust me. Because this presence that He stood in was so powerful, so awesome, so anointed, so terrible, so to speak. Like the scriptures say, He's terrible in His presence. Terrible in the sense that you knew that there's no power on earth that could challenge Him. Folks, I'm not afraid of nuclear bombs at all. I have no fear of nuclear disaster. Because I know that the God of the universe that revealed Himself to me is greater than any demonstration that man can concoct. The Creator of heaven and earth gave us the wisdom to make those stupid bombs. He is not going to be outdone by His creation. And I saw that about Him. And then they strapped me down and they said, "You can renounce Him." And I said, "No, I can't renounce Him because He's the Lord of all. And He should be your Lord." That was my great sermon. I wish, it could have been a lot longer. But probably if I would have got going any more than that, I would have messed it up like just about everything else. That's why I have this on an outline, because it's 20 years old. Even though I can relive points of it right now, and I have purposely asked the Lord tonight, please don't let me bawl up here. Please don't let me weep and cry. Because what I saw happen to my wife, it gripped me, and it still grips me to this day. and I have seen my wife literally become this person that lived in this dream. When this man cut my head off, as soon as the very instant I saw the sword coming down and it touched my neck, the moment that the blade touched my neck, I was gone. I felt no death whatsoever. And all of a sudden I was up, it wasn't a ceiling as this high, but it was quite high. And I was standing there and again holding a person's hand, and I was looking down upon the scene. And it was very grotesque, and I don't know why I was shown it this way, but I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw from the beginning to the end. My head was cut off, and I was bleeding profusely. It was very, very strange. And even though this hand was holding me, I didn't know who it was. I was actually more interested in seeing me dead there than the fact that I was actually delivered from the death. And then all of a sudden I looked down and realized, my gosh, it's another one of these rugged hands holding my hand. And I looked up, and it was the Lord again, the Lord Jesus Christ. Folks, it doesn't matter what you go through here.
Unless you live in a remote forest or mountain area without a phone, they will catch you within minutes. In the coming internet prison, nobody will be able to hide. Like in the movie Hunger Games, the general population will live in resettlement sectors and movements will be restricted. You can get an idea of that by watching my previous 4 videos. Only the Luciferian elite will be unrestricted, and the more you please the elite, the more social credit you will get. The Bible tells us that a new Pharaoh came into power, who did not know about Joseph. A new Antichrist of this world will come into power, who will not know about God, and will not honor God. The result will be a time of Luciferian enslavement in the end of days, followed by severe judgment plagues, and then the final exodus of God's people, which will happen at the glorious coming of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Praise God. Jesus asked us to watch and pray always, to be able to escape what is coming upon this world, and to be able to stand before the Son of Man. Are you watching and praying? My friends, time is not going to be that easy. There will be birth pains, and you have to look out. You have to daily pray to God that He will open your eyes so you will be able to escape what is coming upon this world.